Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cinema A to B. Today we got a little something special. It is St. Paddy's Day officially today, and we're releasing this episode. So we went with a, shall we say, a fun listener request from my buddy Colin. We are doing The Quiet Man from 1952. And just to put it in a little perspective, it's a movie kind of set in Ireland. It's not really a St. Paddy's Day movie, but the request was talking about that Colin grew up watching this on St. Paddy's Day, and so for him, it's always kind of associated with this. So in honor of Colin, we're going to talk about this movie for him on St. Paddy's Day. So Ben, I've never seen this movie before. I don't think you ever have.
No.
So this is a first viewing for both of us. The movie is The Quiet Man from 1952. John Ford directed.
Yes.
Thoughts?
What a strange, fun movie from the early 50s. This is not in my wheelhouse, like at all. And I must admit, I've not watched a bunch of John Ford, even though you're talking about a four-time Academy Award-winning director. I mean, largely considered one of the greats. I'm not a huge fan of Ford, and I'll tell you why is his shot selection. Dude never liked close-ups. Like everything was in like a two-shot or further back, and I'm just not a fan of that. Like I'm not. I value the close-up in film. I think you do a disservice to your actors by not getting the camera in that close, but Mr. Ford thought otherwise. No, it's a really interesting movie. My own kind of connection with it is the fact that in the 8-9 day the Wild Rover Vagabond tour that we took through Western and Southern coastal Ireland, we went through numerous like filming locations for this movie.
That's awesome.
In Galway and Clifton. Like in fact, you go through and I think it's Clifton has a bronze statue, double statue of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara from the film.
Wow. Interesting.
And it's like in front of one of the major locations like that they used. What's amazing to me, having just been in Ireland in October, like the country still looks like it did in this film.
That's crazy.
Like it's insane. Like it literally still, the countryside looks just like that. It's untouched by time. It is wild. The cottages, the tour they took us on, they did a sheepdog demonstration, and the couple that train and raise these dogs and then also like raise sheep, they don't live in the cottage, but they kept the original cottage intact. It looks straight out of like this film. It's built exactly the same. You go in, it's very quaint. Like it's really, really interesting to watch this movie made in the 50s, set in Ireland, I believe. And yeah, you could go there today to those filming locations and they look like pretty much the same as they did in 51 when they filmed this. So that's kind of amazing. Really beautiful looking movie. I mean, like there's just Ford's composition I have no qualms with, and I might dump on him a little bit for not shooting anything in close up, but the guy knew how to shoot a picture. The acting is solid. I've got some opinions on like who I think is actually like bringing it the best, and we can get into that. But yeah, it's quirky. Some of it's kind of odd, just the dynamic between Wayne and Maureen, like just some of the stuff. It's like, wait, that I don't know if this aged well, but yeah, I kind of want, again, not in my wheelhouse at all, but I'm glad I watched it, and I need to watch some more Ford pictures, presumably probably some Westerns. But what are your thoughts on this thing?
So much like you, this is not in my general wheelhouse. I'm not actually a huge John Wayne fan. I know my uncle's a huge John Wayne fan, and a lot of it is just John Wayne is John Wayne in everything. Like, he does not change his character. I mean, like, he could have a different backstory. He sounds and acts the same in pretty much everything that I have seen that he is in. So it's not that I steered clear of it. I just don't gravitate towards this kind of stuff. I watch a decent amount of old movies, but this really wasn't on my radar at all. Didn't even know about it when you were like, we got the little request like, hey, watch this movie. And I was like, I don't even know what this is. So it was surprising. I do want to say they don't make movies like this anymore in a lot of different ways. And I'll talk about some of the good things that I really liked. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Like some of the shot selection, I think just the color palette, it just felt so much more vibrant than how we do movies today. Some of it felt like maybe a little overblown, like, you know, it's a little like more colorful than life actually truly is, but I was kind of okay with it, you know? It like, this is a movie. This is make believe. Like, make me kind of feel some emotions or get that color palette that you're not going to get out in the real world and in reality.
Well, you're looking at a 3-time Academy Award winning cinematographer that shot this Hoke.
Yeah. So and he won best cinematographer this too.
Yes, he did.
He won the Oscar. Like, I think that's one of the things when I was reading up about this movie was funny. It was like this movie was expected to do no business. Was like basically he had to John Wayne had to sign on for Rio Bravo or Rio Grande, one of the Rios. I forget exactly which one. I mean, John Wayne's John Wayne in both of them, so he kind of forgot. But so he had to sign on for one of them, because I think Republic Films, or I forget the actual name of the production company, but they mostly just did cheap westerns, and so they did this because John Ford and Maureen O'Hara and John Wayne were all on board, and they're like, all right, it's not going to be anything good. And then all of a sudden it wins all these awards at the Oscars. This huge moneymaker for them. I think it was a pretty big moneymaker from what I read. But we're still in the age of this is a stage play done that's just filmed. Like, very much so, that we have not transitioned. A lot of how the blocking is, a lot of the sets, how everything kind of looks, and specifically the dialogue. The dialogue is very, very stage play, as opposed to, I think, really in the 70s, late 60s, 70s, we started to transition out of a lot of that, not realistic dialogue, because a lot of dialogue in movies today is not realistic anyways, but it just feels more natural in today's society than it was. And it's not even so much of, you know, this is how they talked back then, because they didn't. It feels that same aspect of cadence and how things are done in plays.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and that's obviously an easy transition of like, just take stage plays, put them in front of a camera and call it a day. I mean, we still have that. I mean, you know, you watch Wicked or any of the other that start off as stage musicals, and there is a difference in how people talk and how things go across. Some of the acting has changed and gotten better as we've learned how to use the camera and how close-ups actually can, you know, give you a lot more depth. And I mean, something you and I have talked about a lot, but I always used to say that acting on stage, you had to be bigger than life to get the emotions across. In a movie, when your face is on a, you know, 30, 40, 70-foot screen, you know, you got to actually be kind of smaller than life because everything is so pronounced. And so a stage actor has to make that adjustment. And so you have so many people who are just used to this bigger than life acting, and that comes through so much more on the screen. So stuff we had to learn. But anyways, it was definitely an interesting movie. Like, there was a lot to it.
So one other thing, not only did it win for Best Cinematography, Ford took home another Best Director for this, and it was nominated in
Best Director. Yeah,
Best Director. Yeah,
and
Best Cinematography.
Picture.
Nominated for Best Picture, didn't win.
Right.
The actor that I think actually gives the best performance is McLaughlin as Will, or was it Will Red? Or
Squire?
Yes.
The brother who...
The brother, yeah. He's the one that I actually think is giving the best performance in the whole film.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, Squire Red Will Donaher. Yeah. I think Wayne and O'Hara are on kind of equal footing here. The other one is Fitzgerald playing McAleen.
He was my favorite.
Yeah, he is my favorite too, but I kind of appreciated Donaher's like the guy playing Donaher's performance. And he was actually the only one nominated for an Oscar for that, for Best Supporting. But yeah, when I watched it, it's interesting. You talk about the over vibrance, like the Technicolor process of color film they're using, like early color film. And so everything's really, really saturated, which is kind of awesome when you're shooting Ireland, that you get that level of green. And I think this movie like totally solidified Ireland as like the Emerald Isle in the minds of Americans because of that oversaturation. And you go there and it's very, very green. But in this film, it's like green, you know, it's like the Land of Oz kind of green. And the whole story and their performances, like you mentioned, almost stage play inspired performances. This to me feels like a live action Disney movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much louder and more ridiculous than like real life. Like everybody's a caricature to a certain extent. And it,
Very
like,
much so.
even Irish culture's like completely exaggerated in this for like kind of to comedic effect. And it ends up being like a really quirky, funny movie about like culture clash to a certain extent. Like, not only is like Thornton American, but he's like more of a city guy. And then he's moving to like not just Ireland, but rural Ireland.
Yeah.
And so that clash is like pretty funny. I wish there was more humor in like the first half of the film. The back half gets really funny, especially when they're fighting. Like, it's just an absolute riot. It reminded me of like later films where something crazy's going on and these side characters are doing something else, and then they catch wind of it and then run off to like follow what's going on. It's almost like the end of Caddyshack, where they're all like the crowd's like all running around. Like, it felt like that. I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. So the closure, like the third act of it, was actually a good payoff for me, because I'll be honest, I got pretty bored during long stretches of this movie. What didn't help was I didn't get a hold of like an actual copy of it. I watched it for free on Pluto, and they interrupt the snot out of it via commercial.
Yeah.
And it's brutal. And so like it took some time to like get through it, but I'm glad I watched it. I enjoyed it. I think my own travels to Ireland like helped me kind of try to get invested a little more in the movie. What's interesting though is like, I don't know, it's an interesting period that it's set in, because, and they do make mention of it, that like Ireland even in the 20s is like still very poor because of the famine. Even though the famine was like 70 years prior, like they still hadn't like really recovered. And it is a very largely, especially at this point, very largely rural country anyway. It still kind of is, as far as like those regions being completely, like I said, totally unspoiled. Like they look just like that. The rock wall, the stone walls, the beaches still look like that. They're totally unspoiled. It's just an absolute delight. Like, if anybody has the means to travel there, and the people are amazing. And the public house is still a thing, although in the rural areas, I talked to some locals, it's starting to die off. Like, the younger generations aren't, more of them are moving to the cities. And so those rural pubs are unfortunately like closing. In the bigger cities, like obviously there's no issue. Like there's tons of them. And American tourists like me, like, keep the pub scene. I don't think the pub scene's dying in those towns. It's just, but Americans are like keeping it thriving better than ever, because we love to drink too. And Americans have tried to recreate the Irish pub for probably 100 years, and we still like, it's one of one. You can't copy it. Like it's you just can't duplicate it. Like you immediately step into an Irish pub, and it's like, it's just special. It is like, there's a whole vibe there, and the history, and they don't serve that many beers, but every beer they have is incredible, and they serve it out of the actual like brand's pint glass. Like if it's Guinness, it's in a Guinness glass, and if it's Smithwick, it's in that glass. Like, they just do it right.
What about Bud Light? Did they put it in the Bud Light glass?
They punch you right in the face and throw you out the door. No, they suggest something else, like a good Pilsner. Like they'll have a really good Pilsner from Europe, like on draft. They have something for everybody. Sure. But it was good to see John Wayne be willing to order a good porter. Yeah. Yeah.
You got to. I mean,
I should be drinking a Guinness while we're recording this, but
me too. But so I actually ended up I had gotten this from the library, but ended up not being able to grab it before I needed to watch it, and so also had to watch it on Pluto. And I'm going to tell you right now, it is, for those of you who that's how you mainly watch your movies,
forget it.
It is like, it'd be like I'd have like 10 minutes of movie, and then I'd have to be like 3 to 4 minutes of commercials, and then another 10 minutes. And it's just like, I'm almost watching as many commercials as I'm actually watching a movie. And like you said, it made it a whole lot worse of having to have stop and go. Like, there were parts where I'm like, I don't know if I really want to finish this, but I got to push through. And of course, that's something that Colin did right. He talked about it, where he was like, there was 2 movies they watched all the time on St. Patty's Day, and this was the boring one for him. So we definitely did not pick the interesting movie of his 2 choices.
I had to pick it because it, had a little bit of a connection with as far as seeing some of the locations and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't the super engrossing. But I'm telling you, man, I'm sure I have seen other films with Maureen O'Hara in them, but stunning.
Yeah.
What a stunning actress. And, this feels like a transitionary film because I could especially tell that she was playing a little more subtlety sometimes in her facial expressions for the camera. Mm-hmm. And she didn't fall as much into the more caricature, like the way actresses and actors were in the 40s. She was playing it quite a bit more toned down. I mean, I don't know what it is about movies from this era where a guy just freaking grabs a woman. Like nothing subtle, just pulls her.
Yeah. Hasn't have a full conversation with her, but just pulls her in for a kiss immediately when finds her.
Of course, she had snuck into the cottage, so I felt like that actually was justified. But now him dragging her, like freaking kicking her in the butt and dragging her for 5 miles while the townspeople like encourage him. And that woman hands him that stick, like
to bit her with. What the heck? Yeah.
Now there is some, even for the 50s, there's some tongue in cheek in that, in the way, like I think that's lost on some people that watch this are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how John Wayne's like treating her. It's like there's a lot of over the top nature to this movie. Even in the 50s, there's over the top nature to this, but it's still pretty uncomfortable. Like you're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, Laura was a little uncomfortable too. She's like, I am not happy with what's going on right now. She looked at me. She's like, don't you ever drag me through the mud.
Drag you through the mud.
There was some interesting choices too. Like when they get caught in the rain out in the fields, or just like walking the fields, and right before, and then he like takes his hat, puts his gloves in his hat, and then just throws his hat, just chucks it into the wherever. And I was like, what? Like, I don't like, because there was no dialogue. Like, it wasn't like she was like, oh, if only you would throw your hat and gloves into the ether, will I love you? It was just
there's a couple of places, I don't even notice in the movie where the actors and actresses are mouthing lines, but there's no audio.
Yeah.
Like Ford just decided, nah, I don't need that. I was just going to hang on the shot. Yeah.
He's pulling a Nolan. He's like, you don't really need dialogue for
Tenet?
this. Yeah, pretty much. Instead of just putting soundtrack too high over it, he just cuts out the dialogue completely. Might as well. But there were like moments like that. I'm like, this is just a little ridiculous, little crazy.
Yeah, but I think you have to look at it and watch it from that standpoint, where it's sort of it is the overtop caricatures of kind of, there's plenty of stereotyping there. I mean, Michelin is just a complete like stereotype of like a Irish, kind of drunken Irish sage / town crier.
Basically, I mean, yeah. I also love at the beginning when he just picks up the bags, doesn't say anything, and you just have this big tall American who's like towering over everybody, and you just go over, grab his bags, and walk off. Like,
so let's get all the jobs that he does. He's a nice Uber or Lyft driver at the train station.
Yeah, true. From a town like 5 miles away.
He's a bookie.
Yeah.
Taking prop bets on fights, and he's a matchmaker apparently.
Dude,
I did appreciate the whole like them setting all the ground rules for like courtship.
It was a different time. But man, it's all about that hustle culture, man. He's got to pay for his pub tab.
His whiskey.
Yeah.
Dude loves some whiskey.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
He does.
No, it's fun.
Yeah. And I think like you also make the characters, especially John Wayne and Maureen, are a little bit more stubborn than probably in reality, or a little more obtuse than in reality. Like John Wayne not understanding why she wanted her money or all that stuff.
Yes.
And then also, not sometimes understanding what he was going on, like wouldn't give stuff up. So it was definitely let's just kind of continue to beat these characters against each other. Like, Yeah, I know you've seen each other for 4 days and are now married, but it's you're gonna have to deal with each other. Live together. I just found it really funny. Like, this is the typical romantic comedy in the 50s, apparently. Like, is this what they did? Yeah. But
so yeah, where the bronze statue of the two of them is in Clifton in Connemara.
okay.
And shout out, because the hotel we stayed at there was this Abbey Glen Castle Hotel. And if you ever go through there, you have to stay there, because the owner of this hotel tells this completely random history of the region and the hotel for like an hour pretty much every night of the week for like new arriving guests. And it's an absolute riot and plenty of drinking, and it's bizarre and incredible all at once. But yeah, totally shout out to the Abbey Glen Castle Hotel in Clifton. And it's a really cool, quaint town. I remember we walked the Castle Hotel is like on the outskirts up in the hills. Mm-hmm. And Gwen and I walked down in the evening to go get dinner and hit the pubs and stuff. And it was pretty cool and damp evening, October, and you could smell them burning turf. Which they're starting to outlaw, unfortunately, in Ireland. Like, there's like one or two more generations that get to like actually burn turf, and then they're gonna stop cutting it. But it's got a real unique scent, and it's like, oh, this is Ireland. Yeah. We would call it peat, but yeah, they call it turf. But yeah, it's definitely got its own scent and
smell
like,
to it.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's really neat. Yeah, cool place, beautiful country. Yeah.
So, like you said, there's definitely some funny moments in this movie, and they're kind of spattered about. My favorite was when Flynn, the Irish drunk, basically the guy who had all the jobs, looked at the Catholic father and was just like, after he had basically lied to the brother, and was just like, it's going to be 3, Holy Fathers and 4 Hail Marys or whatever. It's like that. And he just kind of, father
he just nods.
Yeah. He's just like, yeah.
Lonergan's like, yeah. Tons of filming locations. I appreciate the fact that it looked like they tried to shoot as much of the movie as they possibly could on location. There are instances where they can't, and like they didn't, and you have the 50s like flat backdrop, and it's like, it doesn't.
It's so bad.
It is. But that was so common up until the 70s. Mm-hmm. Like even into the 60s, that was just standard. If you couldn't shoot on like, okay, we're going to build a set that kind of looks like it, but not really.
Oh, not even close.
The beach stuff was rough. Like, I was glad the actual race of the horses was like a real race.
But the cut back and forth, it was so noticeable.
Yeah, it's a studio.
It was so terrible.
It's a studio, yeah.
And again, like you said, not even good. I mean, it really feels like they just set up in some theater, put some sand down on the stage, and put a backdrop up. But like, it doesn't even feel like a studio does nowadays. Like,
that's what you did then. Like, I mean,
it's so rough.
But audiences weren't as
savvy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and conditioned to looking for more authenticity with stuff like that. So it's like, I don't know, the back half of the movie, or the back quarter, I'd say I felt like there was less of that. But yeah, when they cut to it, I was like, yeah, it's not great. Not great.
Now, talking about the fight scene, obviously it's not up to standards, but actually a lot of it too was apparently they had to shoot it in a way and actually simulate it in a way because Victor was he was like 62 at the time or something like that, and was actually having like health problems, and so they couldn't actually do a fight scene like it normally would have been done in the 50s. And so they had to kind of choreograph it a little bit more, do some shots where they can put people in where you're only seeing the back of his head, kind of a thing.
He was like 64, 65.
Oh, wow. Even older than
that. Not a good 64, 65. Because he unfortunately passed away like in 59. He was like 72. So it wasn't that much, longer, several years later after the movie. And
so, but that's because Wayne talks about the fact there's a lot more like roundhouse punches and really choreographed kind of hits that you obviously wouldn't have gotten from a prize fighter. And he's like, but we kind of had to do that to slow it down, not make it as
it's more comedic than it is like violent.
Yeah.
Although I did laugh when he spits that tooth out at the
But also for a prize fighter, man, he gets walloped a lot, you know? So
he had no defense, apparently. Like, his hands were always down.
Pretty much. Now, granted, he got sucker punched several times.
2 or 3 times, yeah.
In the actual fight, he got hit a lot.
He got sucker kicked once they said that they were fighting under certain rules. And he's like, "What's that?" And then he gets kicked by him. His foot just shows up in frame. Just yeah. By the way, my only gripe with the film is there's not enough. Yeah, there's not enough smoking from John Wayne in this movie.
That's very true. Well, I mean, he'll take a puff and then he throws it out. Like, what the heck? Like, why waste? Like, when he got left by her, she had taken her like cart back or whatever, and he was walking back, and he sits down on like by the water, and he sits down. He literally pulls a cigarette out, lights a match, lights it, takes one puff, and then tosses it off. And I'm like, what? That's it? Like, what's going on, bud? Are you that angry that you're just like? Yeah. I gotta stop.
Super mad.
And I'm out.
I love he strikes a match like off the rafters or stone or something, lights it off of that oil lamp in the pub. There's a very, very inventive way of lighting up, but yeah.
You gotta save those matches, man.
It's accurate because Wayne was a prolific smoker. In fact, it's basically what did him in. Like lung cancer, he had a whole lung removed, and yeah, it spread to his stomach.
He looked cool.
He did.
Doing it. Sorry.
I was trying to guess how old he was in this movie, and I was like, he looks really old, but I bet he's only like 45. That's exactly what he was. He looked like he's in his 50s, and he was like 44 or 45 when they made it. Yeah.
And that's what happens when you smoke, kids.
It does. Yeah. Yeah, it does. But yeah, you're right. Wayne playing Wayne.
It's just Wayne.
It worked.
Just John Wayne.
Ford apparently didn't have a problem with it. He kept putting him in his movies.
Yeah.
And as much as you want to bang on John Wayne, he was an Academy Award winning actor for True Grit. Gonna say
which is still, it was a good movie. Yeah, but John Wayne is still John Wayne. You know. So
lots of actors are, but yeah, I'll admit, I'm with you. I was never a huge John Wayne fan. Like, so I want to mention this because I think it's kind of cool and sort of sad at the same time. So Wayne is like, for me, the start of this run of these leading men that are like all over like 6'2", really like big. Cause I mean, Wayne was somewhere around 6'3", 6'4", probably weighed, I don't know, 225 or so, like for the time, like a very large man. You have him and he kind of hands the baton to Heston. Who I'm a huge fan of Charlton Heston. Like, and I don't think Heston's that much better of an actor than Wayne either. Heston was pretty much Heston as well. And then Heston hands the baton to Clint Eastwood. And then Eastwood hands the baton to Schwarzenegger. And after that, we thought it was going to be Dwayne Johnson, and that's not really happened. So it's kind of died off, but you had these run of these really large, almost larger than life, especially on screen, leading men in Westerns, epics, historical epics, and then into like, you know, full-fledged action films. But Wayne is kind of the OG for me. Yeah. When it comes to that. Like, there's really not anybody before him that's like, you know, 6'3", 6'4" on screen. So yeah.
I mean, and he does have good screen presence. Like, when I could give you that.
I think that's why Ford put him in his movies. I think it's because the camera like loved the guy.
I mean, he's done some fun stuff. I mean, like he did, you know, obviously a lot of World War II, you know, films.
Like The Longest Day. Yeah, The Longest Day.
A lot of Westerns. I mean, I enjoy them but I see them for what they are. But I mean, he has a very prolific. But when I looked him up on IMDb, like The Quiet Man is listed as one of his most notable films, and I was like, again, I'd never heard of this. So like, well known for like, you know,
I'd heard it in passing,
and then The Quiet Man.
Yeah.
It's like, I was like, what? How have I never heard of this movie?
But is he really that quiet?
No, he's not. He's just quiet about having killed a man with.
By the way,
fist.
I thought the boxing scene was like really well done. I almost wanted more of like intercutting of that sort of stuff, but
gotta leave you wanting, buddy.
I guess so, because it looked great, like the way it was lit and the canvas and stuff. And it had some filtering on it to make it look like more of a sort of a quasi flashback. They really only use that as like the reason for him leaving, and I guess not wanting to fight, but I felt like maybe there was something missing in the story potentially for that. I don't know. It felt like that could have been like the impetus for like maybe friction between him and Mary Kate, but because he doesn't actually have. I expected him to have like a moment with her where he's like, I killed a man in the ring, and that doesn't happen. There's a couple other people that follow. There's that one guy that follows boxing that knows it.
Reverend.
Yeah, which I was totally confused by. Like, are some of them Catholic and some of them Protestant?
Yeah, I think so. Because
that's right. Because when they drive away, that guy, the Catholic, the father, hides his collar and then is like, all right, everybody cheer him on like you're Protestant, or give him a Protestant cheer or something like that. It was super funny. Yeah.
Well, it sounded like they had a really good relationship with the Reverend, because they were always like in every scene they were really close to each other, and they seemed to relationship,
right?
Which is fun. Nice. So there's a story that I read about this movie about the end. So if you remember, at the end is just a shot of John and Maureen kind of waving to the camera.
So random.
It's so random. And then she leans in, says something to him, and he just kind of gives a look. So the story basically goes is John Ford went to Maureen and was like, I want you, this is the line you need to say to him. And I've not told him what the line is. And Maureen was basically along the line, it said something like, I can't say that to the Duke. Like, no. And she goes, the only way I will say that is if no one ever knows what I've said. So like Ford was sworn to secrecy, Maureen was sworn to secrecy, she says it, and so that reaction is actually a real reaction from John Wayne. That's how the story goes. Again, so
we don't know.
We don't know what she actually says.
Everybody went to their grave
with it, yeah. So, because even John Wayne was like, all right, yeah, no, we don't need to tell anybody what she said. But apparently Ford gave her the line.
Was it to get him to run after her?
Or I think just react, and then maybe to run after her? Like,
Remind me, what is his reaction?
Is he just kind of like, he's looking forward, she whispers something in his ear, then he just kind of like turns to her with like a shocked face, and then she laughs and then runs off, and then he runs after her. So
scandalous. And on that note, we've talked about this movie long enough, like much longer than I had any anticipation of.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be one of our shorter episodes.
Yeah. So thanks to Colin for the St. Patty's Day recommendation of 1952's The Quiet Man. Yeah, I mean, I known some folks that had seen this and love it. It's it's a generational thing, right? But yeah, I don't watch a bunch of movies from the 50s. It's a pretty short list. I probably, frankly, watch more from the 40s than I do 50s cinema, or even the late 60s. I start
picking back up.
Yeah. So
it just feels the 50s just had something about it that just didn't have the allure of the 40s, but yet didn't have the grit or the realism of like the late 60s, early 70s that switched over.
Here's the challenge. I think whether it's books, movies, music, those art forms are usually better when like the times are bad. Like they just are, because they're this creative release and escape. Like I think 70s cinema is so good because the 70s in the United States just largely sucked. And the late 60s, it started to suck too. And so you get more of that. 50s in the United States, now not for everybody. I want to caveat that.
Yeah.
But for a lot of the populace, it was pretty chill. No war, middle class is booming. So the movies kind of reflect this sort of like, I don't know, they're just not interesting usually, typically.
Yeah.
The 40s is the inverse of that. You've come out of, or during, Hollywood's still cranking out films during the Second World War, which is just incredible to even think about, and good stuff in the 40s. So I think that's the only exception to this rule, and I know Tarantino disagrees, but is the 80s. Because the 80s were a pretty chill decade, and I love the movies of the 80s. They kind of reflect that excess, and they're fun. But yeah, the 50s I think were an equivalent decade for people, but I'm just not into it usually. I do like this one though. I'm not going to go back and watch it, but
no,
I appreciate it for what it is, and it is a beautiful film. Like visually, it's just really, really nice stuff. And if you like the Duke, you've already seen this movie.
Yeah.
So,
or if you like John Ford. So.
Yeah. So, with that said, we will be back next week with Mission Impossible.
Oh, we're gonna call
Dead
it
Reckoning
Part 1.
Yeah, which is
The only one, though.
yeah.
Part 1 of 1.
But yeah. The last time I tried to do an intro to our next movie, I decided to change the order later.
That's why I'm so surprised.
And it didn't work. Like, I had to cut it out because I was like, wait, that's not the next one. No, for sure, the next week's episode will be Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is hilarious because the next one is not Dead Reckoning Part 2. It's the Final Reckoning. So somebody changed their mind on the titling, and it makes no sense whatsoever. But that will be the film.
You heard it here first, fans. Or you didn't, because we ended up changing the movie that we're going to do, and so Ben's going to have to go in and cut it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.